The morning Alara Voss turned 23, no one in the house remembered. Not her mother, who spent the early hours sitting in the pale green chair by the window, staring at nothing in particular and waiting for something that never came. Not her father, who had already left for his club before the sun finished rising, the way he always did when the weight of the house pressed too hard on his chest. And certainly not Vivienne, who was still asleep at 9:30, her dark hair spread across a silk pillow, one hand resting near a small jar of rose cream on the bedside table. Alara had stopped waiting for people to remember years ago. She woke before dawn the way she always did, dressed herself without calling for a maid because the maid was usually busy with Vivienne, and walked down the back corridor of Voss' house to the east wing. The east wing was the part of the house nobody used anymore. The wallpaper there was faded gold and cream, peeling slightly at the corners near the ceiling. The curtains were dusty. The rugs were older than anyone currently living in the house. But at the very end of that corridor, past a door that stuck in summer and swelled shut in winter, was the library. It was not a grand library. It was not the kind of library that visitors were shown, the one on the ground floor with the good furniture and the leather-bound books arranged by color. This was the real library, the one that had accumulated books over generations, not because anyone planned it, but because books have a way of finding rooms where no one will throw them away. There were novels with broken spines and atlases with pages that crinkled at the edges. There were recipe books from great-grandmothers and travel journals from uncles who never came home. There were philosophy books that smelled like old wood and small volumes of poetry pressed between heavier things. Alara knew every shelf. She had organized them herself over many years in the slow and careful way you organize something when you know no one is going to hurry you, by subject first, then by author, then, in the sections where she cared most, by the feeling a book gave you when you held it. She sat in the single armchair near the window, the one with the faded blue cushion that had permanently taken the shape of her, and she opened a novel she had already read twice. She was not reading for the plot. She was reading because the words were familiar and the room was quiet, and for the next few hours, nothing would be asked of her. The house outside the library was a different country. Voss' house stood on a wide street in a part of the city that had once been fashionable and was now simply respectable, which is a much smaller thing. The facade was clean. The iron gate at the front worked smoothly. From the outside, a person passing by would not have guessed that the Voss family had spent the last 4 years gradually selling furniture, then paintings, then the silver, always starting with the things least likely to be noticed by guests. Alara had noticed. She had been 12 when the first painting came down. A landscape with cows, not beautiful by any measure, but it had hung in the dining room for so long that the wallpaper behind it was brighter than the rest of the wall. Her father had replaced it with a mirror, which was clever because mirrors look like decoration but also make a room feel larger, and a larger room feels wealthier even when it isn't. She had been 15 when they let go of the second footman. She had been 17 when she understood that the conversations her parents had in low voices behind closed doors were about money, specifically the absence of it. She had been 19 when she understood that Vivienne was the plan. Vivienne Voss was 3 years older than Alara, and had been the acknowledged beauty of the family since she was old enough to sit still for a portrait. She had dark hair and pale skin and large gray eyes that people described as soulful, without knowing exactly what they meant by it. She carried herself in a particular way that had been carefully taught, that made her seem taller than she was and more composed than any person actually is on the inside. She had been trained from girlhood for one purpose, to make an excellent marriage. Alara had not been trained for anything in particular. This was not said out loud. No one in the Voss household would have said such a thing, but it was understood the way many things in families are understood, through patterns of attention and inattention, through who got the new dress when money was tight and who made do, through who was asked for their opinion at the dinner table and who was left to eat in silence. Vivienne got the lessons, the clothes, the introductions, the drawing room education in music and language, and the art of conversation. Alara got the East Library and the freedom that comes from being thoroughly overlooked. She had, for many years, told herself this was a fair trade. She was not entirely sure she believed it anymore. The door at the end of the corridor swelled and gave way with the familiar thud she had come to use as a clock. It meant someone was up and moving in the main part of the house. She listened to the footsteps, identified them as belonging to Nan, the older of the two housemaids, and went back to her book. An hour passed. Then another. She heard, distantly, the sound of Vivienne's voice rising in one of its bright arcs through the house, the way it did when Vivienne was pleased about something or performing pleasure for someone else. It was a pretty sound, like a small bird singing. Alara had grown up beside it for 20 years and had never once learned to tell the genuine version from the performed one. She did not go out to investigate. She turned a page. At noon, Nan appeared in the library doorway. Nan was a stout woman of 50 with red hands and a permanently worried expression who had been with the family since before either of the girls was born. She was the only person in the house who called Alara Miss Alara, rather than simply Alara, which the family did, which stripped even a name of ceremony. "Your mother is asking for you," Nan said. "Is she well?" "She is in the sitting room. She seems." Nan paused in the way people pause when they are looking for a word that is true without being unkind. "Unsettled." Alara put her book face down on the arm of the chair, though she knew it would crack the spine. The sitting room was on the first floor, south-facing, the warmest room in the house in the afternoons. Her mother sat in the pale green chair, which she always did, but she was not looking at the window this time. She was looking at her hands, which she had folded in her lap with the careful deliberateness of someone who does not trust them to behave otherwise. Helen Voss was 51 and had once been lovely in the way her daughters were lovely now, each one inheriting a different version of the same raw material. She had fine features that had sharpened with age rather than softened, and gray was coming into her brown hair at the temples in a way she chose not to address because addressing it cost money they did not have. She looked, when she did not know someone was watching, like a woman braced for bad news. "Sit down, Alara," she said. Alara sat in the chair across from her. Her mother looked at her for a moment, and Alara noticed she did not say good morning, or ask how she had slept, or mention that it was her birthday. "I have something to tell you," her mother said. "It is not easy news." Alara waited. Helen Voss drew a breath. "Your father spoke with the Duke of Vane's solicitor yesterday afternoon." Alara said nothing. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Duke Aldrich Vane was one of those figures that a city like theirs produced occasionally, a man of great property and greater reserve, the kind of man who was discussed at dinner parties more than he attended them. He was said to be cold. He was said to be ruthless in business. He was said to have once dismissed an entire household staff in a single afternoon because one of them had told a lie he found inconvenient. He was said to be many things, most of them not warm. He was also, as of 18 months ago, betrothed to Vivienne. "He is," her mother continued, choosing each word with the care of someone placing objects in a china cabinet, withdrawing from the arrangement. The room did not change. The light through the window did not shift. Alara sat very still. "He is breaking the engagement," she said. "He says the arrangement is dissolved." Her mother pressed her lips together. "He has been informed as of this morning that Vivienne has." She stopped. Alara waited. "Vivienne is gone," her mother said finally. "She left last night. There was a letter. She went with Captain Oliver Hale. She has been corresponding with him for some months, apparently. I did not know. Your father did not know." She paused. "We did not know." The words arrived in the room, and sat there like uninvited guests. Ilara thought about the sound of Vivienne's bright voice that morning, rising through the hallways of the house. She thought about all the times she had heard that voice and not been able to tell the genuine from the performed. She thought about the fact that her sister had apparently been planning this for months, had been writing letters and making arrangements and constructing an entire departure, and had done it all so quietly that no one had heard a sound. She felt something, but it was complicated and she did not unpack it then. "What does this mean?" Ilara asked. Her mother looked at her with eyes that were very tired and very careful. "It means the Duke's solicitor is expecting a response from your father. The Duke is not pleased. The Voss name is connected to this situation now. He has indicated that he considers the family to have acted in poor faith since your sisters," she searched for the word again, "intentions were known to no one and therefore could not have been disclosed. Can father manage it?" Her mother said nothing for a long moment, which was its own kind of answer. The debts were not a secret Ilara had been kept from. She knew what the furniture sales meant, and the paintings, and the second footman who had never been replaced. She knew that Vivienne's marriage to the Duke had not been romantic in its original architecture. It had been financial. The Duke's wealth and title would have steadied the family's position for a generation. Vivienne's beauty and the Voss name, which was old if not wealthy, would have given the Duke something he apparently wanted, which was a respectable marriage to a woman people admired. Now Vivienne was gone with a cavalry officer, and the debt remained, and the Duke was displeased, and her father was at his club. "I see," Ilara said. "We will manage," her mother said, in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. "Your father has some options to consider." Ilara looked at her hands. She thought about the East Library. She thought about the novel she had left face down on the arm of the chair with the blue cushion, cracking the spine. She thought about the fact that she had spent 23 years in this house being the one who required nothing, who took up no space, who asked for nothing and was given accordingly. She thought about the Duke. She had seen him once at a distance, at a public event the family had attended the previous autumn. He was tall. He stood apart from the crowd not in the way shy people do, by shrinking, but in the way that certain people do when they have decided the crowd does not concern them. He had dark hair and a precise sort of face, the kind that doesn't show much on purpose. He had not smiled at anything during the hour she had observed him, but he had also not been unkind to anyone she could see. He had simply been entirely, absolutely elsewhere inside his own head, even while standing in a room full of people trying to get his attention. She had thought at the time, he is not cold, he is guarded. She had filed this observation and forgotten about it until now. "I am going to go upstairs," Ilara said and stood. "Yes," her mother said, not really hearing her. Ilara walked to the door, then stopped with her hand on the frame. "How long?" she said without turning around. "I beg your pardon. How long do we have, before the debts become something father cannot manage quietly?" Silence from the pale green chair. "Mother." 2 months, her mother said. "Perhaps 3 if your father speaks to certain people, but the Duke," she trailed off. "The Duke's solicitor indicated that he may pursue certain remedies given the circumstances of the broken arrangement, which would make things considerably faster." Ilara nodded once. She went upstairs. She did not go to her room. She went to the East Library, sat in the blue chair and picked up her novel. She did not read it. She held it in her lap and looked at the window, at the pale sky beyond the old curtains, and she thought. She was not good at many things she had been told she should be good at. She could not play the piano with the ease Vivienne could. She was not as skilled at conversation in rooms full of strangers, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had never been directed to practice it. She did not possess whatever quality it was that Vivienne had, that quality that made people's eyes follow her across a room. But she was exceptionally good at thinking. She had spent 23 years in a house full of people who were not thinking, who were feeling and hopping and pretending, and she had quietly, carefully, developed the habit of thinking instead. About money and how it moved. About people and what they actually wanted underneath what they said they wanted. About situations and how they had more than one possible end. She thought for 2 hours. Outside, the city moved on. Carts passed on the street below. Somewhere a door banged shut in the wind. Nan brought her tea she hadn't asked for and left it on the small table without saying anything, which was one of Nan's great skills. At 3 o'clock, Ilara put the novel down, drank the cold tea in 2 swallows and made a decision. She was going to go and see the Duke. Not tomorrow. Not after her father tried his options and failed at them, which she knew he would. Not after the solicitors had exchanged another round of letters. She was going to go the following morning, before her father knew she was gone, before her mother could stop her with worry, before the situation closed into something no one had any power over. She was going to go, and she was going to say something no one in the Voss family had thought to say, because no one in the Voss family had thought to send her. She was going to make an offer. She spent the rest of the afternoon thinking through what that offer would look like. Not the feelings of it, not the fear of it, not what it would mean about her life and what her life had been until now. Those were things she would deal with in their own time. Right now she was thinking through the structure of it, the logic, the terms, the way you think through a problem when you are the only person in the room and the room is a library and you have spent your whole life practicing exactly this. By dinner she had an outline. By midnight she had a plan. She ate dinner alone, which was not unusual. Her mother had taken a tray in her room. Her father had not come home. Nan served her a plate of cold chicken and bread and a small dish of stewed apples and said nothing about where the rest of the family was, because Nan had also spent her whole life in this house and had also developed the skill of not saying things that didn't help. "Thank you, Nan," Ilara said. "Happy birthday, Miss Ilara," Nan said quietly from the doorway before she left. Ilara sat with that for a moment. Then she ate her dinner, went upstairs and went to sleep. Tomorrow was going to require a clear head. She did not lie awake worrying. That was the thing about having spent 23 years being overlooked. It teaches you a kind of calm that other people don't quite understand. When you have never been the center of anyone's plan, you get very good at making your own. When you have never been the one people look at, you get very good at looking. She closed her eyes. Outside, the city settled into its night sounds. The clock in the hallway counted the hours. Somewhere far away, her sister was riding toward a new life with a man she had chosen, which was brave or reckless or both, and Ilara did not judge her for it. She only thought, someone still has to deal with what is left. That had always been the arrangement, even if no one had ever said so out loud. She was the one who was left. And tomorrow, for the first time in 23 years, she was going to walk through a door that no one had opened for her. She was going to open it herself. The Duke of Vane did not receive visitors without an appointment. This was not arrogance, or at least not entirely. It was a system. Aldrich Vane had grown up watching people waste enormous amounts of time and energy managing the chaos of unexpected arrivals, unplanned conversations, and decisions made in hallways when they should have been made at desks. He had decided early in his adult life that he would not live that way. Every hour had a purpose. Every meeting had a reason. His secretary, a quiet, efficient man named Mr. Gibbs, maintained a schedule that accounted for everything down to 20-minute intervals, and nothing and no one entered that schedule without going through him first. So when the young woman arrived at Vane House on a Tuesday morning without an appointment, without a letter of introduction, and without a companion of any kind, Mr. Gibbs was not exactly sure what to do with her. She was not, he observed, what you would call remarkable to look at. She was of medium height, with brown hair pinned up in a neat and practical way rather than a fashionable one. She wore a gray dress that was well made but not new, and she carried a small bag that appeared to contain nothing more alarming than a notebook. She stood in the entry hall of Vane House, which was a large and deliberately intimidating entry hall full of dark wood and cold marble and tall windows that let in light without warmth, and she looked around it with an expression that was not impressed. That was the first thing Mr. Gibbs noticed. Not nervousness, not the particular kind of eagerness that visitors usually wore when they came to Vane House hopping for something. She looked around the hall with the neutral attention of someone assessing a room she had not been in before, the way you look at a new library, sorting and cataloging. "I would like to see the Duke," she said, when Mr. Gibbs appeared. "Do you have an appointment, Miss Voss?" she said. "Ilara Voss. And no, I do not have an appointment, but I believe he will want to hear what I have to say." Mr. Gibbs regarded her with the careful patience of a man who had spent 15 years managing a cold Duke's calendar, and had therefore heard every variation of, "I believe he will want to hear what I have to say." "The Duke does not receive unscheduled visitors," he said. "I understand," she said. "Please tell him that Ilara Voss is here, the younger sister of Vivienne Voss. Tell him I have a proposal I would like to put to him directly, and that if he declines to hear it today, I will come back tomorrow and the day after until he does." There was a pause. Mr. Gibbs looked at her. She looked back at him with the same neutral, cataloging expression. He went upstairs. Aldrich Vane was at his desk when Mr. Gibbs knocked, doing exactly what Mr. Gibbs had scheduled him to be doing, which was reviewing the quarterly accounts from his northern property. He did not look up immediately when the door opened. He finished the line he was reading, made a notation in the margin, and then looked up. "There is a young woman in the entry hall," Mr. Gibbs said. "She says she is Ilara Voss, the younger sister." Aldrich set down his pen. He said nothing for a moment. He looked at a point slightly above Mr. Gibbs's head, which was what he did when he was thinking, and did not intend for anyone to interrupt him. The Voss situation was already on his mind. He had received the letter from his solicitor yesterday morning, read it twice, and then placed it at the corner of his desk, where it had been sitting like a small and irritating object he had not yet decided what to do with. The engagement to Vivienne Voss was dissolved. She had left the city with a cavalry officer. The family was in difficult financial circumstances. His solicitor had outlined several possible courses of action, none of which he found satisfying. He was not, contrary to what many people believed about him, a man who enjoyed causing damage. He was a man who required things to be done correctly, and when they were not, he required that the incorrect thing be resolved. The broken engagement was an inconvenience. The Voss family's financial state was their own concern. What annoyed him, specifically, was that he was being positioned as both the injured party and the source of potential rescue, which was a position he found structurally untidy. "Send her up," he said. Mr. Gibbs blinked. This was not the expected response. "Send her up," Aldrich said again, picking up his pen. "And bring tea. She has presumably come a distance." Mr. Gibbs withdrew. Aldrich finished the line in the accounts he had been reading, made another notation, and then closed the ledger. He straightened it so that it aligned with the edge of the desk. He straightened a second book beside it. He moved the pen to a precise position and then turned his chair very slightly so that he was facing the door, which was where she would come from. He waited. He heard her on the stairs before he saw her. Not because she was loud, but because the stairs in Vane House were old and had particular voices in particular places, and he had lived in this house long enough to know what different weights and different paces sounded like. Her step was even and deliberate, not hurried, not the quick, light step of nervousness. She came up the stairs at a steady pace, and she did not hesitate on the landing, which was where visitors usually hesitated, because the landing required you to choose a direction, and the house gave you no guidance. She chose correctly. The study door was open. She appeared in it and stopped in the frame, which was also correct. You do not walk into someone's study uninvited. You stop at the door and wait to be acknowledged. Aldrich looked at her. She looked at him. He had expected, though he would not have said so, something more like Vivienne. Not in appearance necessarily, but in manner. The Voss household had produced one daughter of considerable social skill and poise, and he had assumed the household would have shaped both daughters similarly. What he saw instead was a young woman who was looking at him with an expression that was composed but not false. She was not performing calm. She was calm. There was a difference. "Miss Voss," he said. "Your Grace," she said, and came in when he gestured to the chair across from his desk. She sat down. She placed her bag on her lap. She did not fidget with it. "I'll be direct," she said. "Please," he said. "My family is in debt. You are aware of the general situation. My sister has made a choice that has complicated things considerably, both for your family and for mine. My father is not equipped to manage the current situation in a way that will produce a good result for anyone. I have spent time thinking about it." She paused. He waited. "I am here," she said, "to propose a different arrangement." He leaned back in his chair very slightly, not away from her, just to a more comfortable position, the adjustment of a man settling in for something that might be interesting. "Continue," he said. "You needed a bride," she said. "You chose my sister for reasons that had more to do with strategic practicality than anything else. I do not know all your reasons. I know the obvious ones. A duke with your level of property and responsibility needs a wife eventually, for reasons of household management, social expectation, and the matter of an heir at some later stage. My sister offered you a particular combination of qualities that suited your requirements. She is no longer available." She stopped again. He said nothing. "I am available," she said. "I am not my sister. I am aware of that. I am not offering you a replica of what you arranged for. I am offering you something different which I believe, if you examine it with honesty, is not a lesser thing." He tilted his head by approximately half an inch, which in Aldrich Vane's face was equivalent to someone else raising an eyebrow. "Go on," he said. "I am educated, not in the performance of social charm, which I acknowledge is not my strongest quality, but in the management of practical things. I understand accounts. I understand the running of a household. I read quickly and retain what I read. I do not require constant social attention. I do not need to be at the center of a room. I will not cause you embarrassment. I will not." She paused for the smallest moment. "Leave with a cavalry officer." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. It was not quite a smile. It was more like the beginning of the idea of a smile, the faintest suggestion that one might, under the right conditions, be possible. "And in return," he said, "my family's debts are cleared, not through ongoing support. A single settlement, documented and concluded, after which my family and I are not a financial burden to you or to each other. I would manage this household. You would have a wife who causes you no trouble and is unlikely to surprise you." She folded her hands on top of her bag. He looked at her, not with the quick assessing look he gave most people, the one that sorted them into categories in under 30 seconds. He looked at her with what was, for Aldrich Vane, a sustained and particular attention. She sat with it. She did not fill the silence. She did not add more words to cover the discomfort of being watched. She sat in the chair across from him and let him look, with the same neutral patience she had shown in the entry hall. And he registered this the way you register something that is unusual without being sure, yet whether it is unusual in a good way, or simply unusual. "You walked here," he said. "Yes." "Without a chaperone." "Yes." "That is not done." "No," she agreed. "It is not. But I did not think sending a letter would produce the response I needed, and going through my father would have taken several days and ended with him making an offer quite different from the one I have just made. So I came myself. And if I had simply turned you away at the door? I told Mr. Gibbs I would come back tomorrow, she said, and the day after. Another moment passed between them. The clock on the mantelpiece counted it out. You said you are not your sister, he said. That is correct. What are you then? She considered the question, not as a performance of consideration, but as a person who takes questions seriously and does not answer them before she has thought about them. Practical, she said finally. Observant, not easily startled, not easily moved except by things that are genuinely worth being moved by. I have spent most of my life in a position that required patience and attention and the ability to manage without support. I believe those are qualities that would serve a household of this kind well. He was quiet for a moment. Outside the study window, the city moved. A cart in the street below, wind in the trees at the edge of the property. Mr. Gibbs appeared at the door with a tea tray, placed it on the corner of the desk with the practiced silence of a man who had delivered tea into tense rooms before, and withdrew without making eye contact with anyone. Aldrich poured 2 cups. He did it himself, which was another thing visitors did not expect. He set one in front of her. She picked it up and drank. He noted that she did not add sugar without asking first, which told him she had noticed the tray and made a decision based on what was available rather than what she might have preferred. Your terms need work, he said. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. The family debt settlement, he continued. If it is structured as you describe, a single payment and nothing further, you are asking me to take on significant financial liability with no mechanism for adjustment if circumstances change. The arrangement would need more precision than that. She set down the cup. What would you require? Documentation of every debt, every creditor, no ambiguity about what is owed and to whom, no additional debts incurred by your family after the date of settlement for which I would have any obligation, a clear boundary. Agreed, she said immediately. He blinked. He had expected her to negotiate on that point, to push back, to ask questions. She had agreed immediately, which told him she had already thought through this detail and reached the same conclusion, and had not raised it because she did not want to open a door she intended to concede anyway. Interesting. I have other requirements, he said. I expected you would, she said. I have some of my own. He picked up his pen, not to write with, but in the way he sometimes held it when he was thinking, as a kind of anchor. Tell me yours. My own account, she said. A separate household allowance that comes to me directly, not through the household budget, not through a steward. Funds I manage personally. Not extravagant. Enough for my own books, my own correspondence, and the ability to make small decisions without requiring your permission. He regarded her. Freedom to move through the house as I choose, she continued, including any library or study room without being required to explain myself. Go on. And I would like it to be understood, privately between us, that this is an arrangement built on mutual benefit and honesty. I am not pretending this is a love match. I do not expect you to pretend either. What I expect is that we treat each other with respect and function as capable adults managing a shared life with shared goals. She was looking at him steadily. He looked back. There was a quality to her stillness that he was struggling to place. It was not the stillness of someone who had learned to be quiet in order to please others. It was the stillness of someone who was genuinely at rest inside themselves, who did not need the room to respond to them in order to feel that they existed. He had met very few people like that in his life. Come back tomorrow, he said. She looked at him. With your list, he said. Complete. Every term you want written down. I will have a list as well. We will compare them and find where they align and where they require discussion. She held his gaze for a moment. Tomorrow, she said, and stood and picked up her bag. She moved to the door and stopped, just as she had stopped in the frame when she arrived, with the same precision. She looked back. He was already looking at her, which she had not expected. Most people looked away when you turned, having already moved on to the next thing in their head. He was still looking. "I am sorry," she said, "for what my sister did. It was not your fault and it was not deserved." He said nothing. "I will be here at 9, she said. And she left. He sat for a moment after she was gone, listening to her even step on the old stairs, hearing the exact place she passed where the third step from the bottom had a voice of its own. He heard the front door close, not slam, just close. He picked up the pen again. He sat with it for a long moment. Then he opened his ledger, but he did not look at the accounts. He sat looking at the open page without seeing it, the pen motionless in his hand, and he thought about the particular quality of her stillness, and the fact that she had come through that door with a proposal that was more structurally sound than the one his own solicitor had drawn up, and the look she had given him when she agreed to his documentation requirement without hesitation. He had expected a sparrow. He thought about that. He closed the ledger and went to find Mr. Gibbs to clear the 9 o'clock hour tomorrow. She came back at 9. Not at 1 minute past, not at 10. At 9 exactly, which Aldrich noted because he was at the window when she arrived at the gate, and the clock on the mantelpiece said 9 as the gate opened. She had brought a notebook this time, also a small leather folder. He had his own papers ready. They were arranged on the desk with the kind of precision that would have looked excessive to a casual observer, but made complete sense to anyone who understood that precision was not about control. It was about not wasting time looking for things. Mr. Gibbs brought her upstairs. She came in without hesitation this time, sat in the same chair, placed the notebook and folder on the arm of it. "I have written everything down," she said. "So have I," he said. She opened her notebook. He looked at it across the desk. The handwriting was small and even and very clear, the kind of handwriting that comes from someone who writes often and has stopped trying to make it beautiful and has focused entirely on making it readable. There were no crossings out. The page was organized into numbered points with subpoints indented beneath them. He looked at his own papers. "Read yours," he said. "Financial settlement," she began. "Full documentation of all Voss family debts to be compiled within 14 days of agreement and provided to your solicitor. Settlement to cover all amounts currently owed as of the date of our agreement. Any debts incurred after that date are the responsibility of my family and not subject to any arrangement between us. My father is to sign a separate declaration acknowledging this. I will co-sign it." She looked up. He noted the last part. She was willing to sign a document against her own family, binding them to ensure clarity. This was not a small thing. This told him she understood the purpose of documentation was not to signal distrust, but to make trust unnecessary. "Agreed so far," he said. "I want the documentation compiled within 10 days, not 14, and I want your father's declaration notarized, not merely signed." She made a note. 10 days and notarized, she said. "Agreed." Continue. "Personal account. I asked for a separate household allowance of my own. I have a specific figure." She named it. It was reasonable, not generous and not small, the kind of figure that showed she had thought about what she would actually need and had not inflated it. He wrote the figure down. "Agreed. It will be reviewed annually and adjusted for changes in the household budget." She paused. "Reviewed by both of us or reviewed by you?" He looked at her. "Both of us," he said after a moment. She wrote that down. They continued this way for nearly an hour, trading terms back and forth across the desk, the way two people play a careful game, each one moving deliberately, each one watching what the other placed on the table before placing anything of their own. He was precise. So was she. When she disagreed with him, she said so plainly and gave her reason, and he either accepted the reason or gave a counter one, and they resolved it and moved on. There was no performance in it. No pleading, no flattery, no implication that she needed him to like her. She was doing business. He found this, in a way he did not immediately examine, something close to refreshing. He had spent a considerable portion of his adult life managing people who told him what they thought he wanted to hear. His staff, his solicitors, many of the people at social functions who sought his attention. Even Vivienne had done this, in her careful, polished way, reflecting back a version of whatever the room seemed to want to see. It was a skill he recognized and had learned to work around, but it required a constant background effort, a translation process, a filtering of what was said to find what was true underneath. She did not require this. She sat across from him and said what she thought specifically, with her reasons attached. It was, he discovered, much less work. They reached the end of her list. Then she closed the notebook and folded her hands on top of it and looked at him. "Your list," she said. He unfolded his papers. "I will have one formal social engagement per month that requires your attendance," he said. "Not one of the large ones necessarily. Dinners, a function at the house, situations where your absence would be conspicuous." "Understood. I do not share my schedule in detail. If you need to know where I am, you may ask Mr. Gibbs, but I do not give accounts of my time by habit and I will not begin." She nodded. "The household staff is not to be reorganized in the first 6 months without my agreement. They are established and the system works. After 6 months, if you wish to make changes, we discuss them." "Fair," she said. "I would ask the same courtesy in return. If you have thoughts about how I manage my own responsibilities in the household, I would prefer you raise them with me directly, not with the staff." He considered this for a moment. "Agreed." "Continue," she said. "Guests," he said. "I do not want the house constantly full of people. If you have friends or family you wish to host, I ask for advance notice of a week, not permission, notice, so that I can adjust." "I have very few people to host," she said. He looked at her. She said it without sadness, which was the interesting part. It was a statement of fact, not a complaint. "Nevertheless," he said, "the notice principle applies." "Agreed." He looked at his remaining items. There were 2 more. "I keep my own hours," he said. "I work late frequently. I do not keep social hours for meals unless there is a reason. If you prefer structure in this area, it will not always be possible to provide it." "I also keep my own hours," she said. "Breakfast I generally manage alone. Dinner is a reasonable expectation when you are in the house. When you are not, I am quite capable of dining by myself." "The second item," he said. He stopped. She waited. This was the part he had been thinking about since the previous afternoon. He had written it down and crossed it out and written it again. It was the one item on his list that was not structural or practical, that was something more personal, and he was not, by nature, a man who put personal things on paper. "I will not tolerate being lied to," he said. "About anything. This is not negotiable. If a situation arises that you are not sure how to tell me, find a way to tell me anyway. What I cannot manage is discovering later that I was given a version of the truth rather than the thing itself. I have dealt with that in the past. I do not deal with it again." She was quiet for a moment. "Agreed," she said. "On the same terms. Honesty is something I require as well, not harshness, not every thought you have, but the truth of relevant things." He nodded. She looked at him. "There is one more item on my list," she said, "that I held back." "Tell me." "My sister," she said. "When she returns, because she likely will at some point, I will not be used as a way to manage her situation. She is my sister and I carry feeling about that, but I came here independently of her, and this arrangement is mine. If she seeks help, I may choose to help her in my own way and in my own time. But I will not be made to be the bridge between her and my family and you and your household. That is not part of what I am agreeing to." She said all of this without any particular heat in her voice. He thought about it. Agreed, he said. She held out her hand. He looked at it. This was also unusual. A handshake was not what was expected at this stage of such an arrangement. There would be papers, a formal announcement, solicitors on both sides. But she was sitting across from him with her hand out, a clean, direct offer of agreement, and it was the most honest thing he had seen in this office in years. He reached across the desk and took her hand. Her grip was firm, brief. She did not hold on a moment longer than necessary. She withdrew and picked up her notebook. I will have the documentation ready within 10 days as agreed, she said. I will send a letter to your solicitor with my father's details. Mr. Gibbs will handle the formal arrangements on this end, he said. He will send word when the papers are ready for signing. She stood. She moved to the door and then did the thing she had done the previous day, stopped in the frame and looked back. He wondered if she did this on purpose, or if it was simply how she moved through rooms with that pause at thresholds. One question, she said. Yes. Why did you agree to see me? Yesterday, when Mr. Gibbs came upstairs, you could have sent me away. He held her gaze. Because you said you would come back, he said, and I believed you. She absorbed this. She nodded once. She left. He sat in the chair for a long moment after the sound of her steps had disappeared from the stairs. He picked up the pen and then put it down without writing anything. He looked at the papers on his desk, the list of terms they had gone through together, the small margins where he had written adjustments. He was not sure what to make of her. He was not sure whether that uncertainty was something to be concerned about. He was not, he realized, particularly concerned. He picked up the papers, straightened them against the edge of the desk, and placed them to the right of the ledger. He opened the ledger. He went back to the quarterly accounts from the northern property, which were still waiting, and began to read. Outside the window, the city moved on in its own direction. Downstairs, the front door closed, and the girl who had walked through it was already thinking about what came next. She walked home the way she had come, through the wide streets and then the narrower ones, and she went to the East Library without speaking to anyone she passed on the way, and she sat in the blue chair, and she looked at the ceiling. She had done it. She was going to be a duchess. The words did not feel the way she expected words like that to feel. They did not feel triumphant. They did not feel frightening. They felt like a door she had decided to go through, and now she was on the other side, and the room was large and unfamiliar, but it was a room and she was in it, and that was enough for now. She would learn the room. She was good at that. She picked up the novel from the chair arm where it had been sitting since her birthday, the one with the cracked spine. She opened it to the page she had been on and began to read, and this time she actually read, the words going in and making their meaning, and she sat in the library that belonged to her childhood and the house that had always overlooked her and read until the light changed, and the day was nearly done. Nan brought her tea at 4. Thank you, Nan, Alara said. You were out this morning, Nan said. Not a question, not exactly. Just an observation the way Nan made all her observations. Yes. Nan waited. I have made an arrangement, Alara said. I'll tell my mother tonight. Nan looked at her for a long time. In the particular way Nan had of looking at things she was deciding how much to know about. Is it a good arrangement? Nan asked. Alara thought about the study, about the even exchange of terms, about the handshake over the desk, about the way he had said, without any ornamentation, that he had believed she would come back. I think, she said carefully, that it might be a better one than anyone expected. Nan nodded. She went out without another word, which was the best possible response. Alara drank her tea and looked at the window, at the square of sky going gold and then darker than gold, and she held the warm cup in both hands and thought about what better than anyone expected really meant. It meant she had walked into a room no one had thought to put her in, and she had not been thrown out of it. She had been asked to come back. She had come back, and now the room was hers. The wedding was small. Not small in the way that things are small because they were planned that way. Small in the way that things become when the two people getting married are not interested in performance, and one of them has very few people to invite, and the other prefers rooms that do not contain too many people at once. There were 20 guests. The ceremony was at a private chapel attached to the Vane estate outside the city, a gray stone building that smelled of old wood and candle wax, with narrow windows that made the morning light inside look like it had traveled a long distance to arrive there. Alara's mother sat in the third row and spent most of the ceremony pressing a handkerchief to her mouth in the way of someone trying not to cry without being entirely sure whether the tears were happy or sad. Her father sat beside her mother and looked at the middle distance. Nan was in the back, which was where Nan had insisted on sitting, and had apparently borrowed a dress for the occasion that was slightly too large for her but very clean. Aldrich's side had his solicitor. Two men Alara did not yet know but would come to understand were the managers of his two largest properties, and a small collection of people who were present not from warmth but from professional obligation. There was a woman of about 60 in the second row, upright and severe, who watched the ceremony with an expression of concentrated attention, and who Alara learned afterward was Aldrich's aunt, Lady Cora, his mother's older sister, the last surviving member of his immediate family's generation. The ceremony itself was direct and unembellished. Alara had not wanted a ceremony full of words that were not quite true. When the officiant came to the part about love and devotion, she had asked that those particular passages be kept brief. Aldrich had agreed, which had been its own kind of relief. They said what was required. He placed a ring on her finger. It was plain gold, which she had asked for. He had shown her 3 options and she had chosen the plainest, and he had not argued. They were married. The dinner afterward was at Vane House in the city. The cook had prepared something that was considerable without being extravagant, and there was wine, and people talked in the polite and slightly cautious way that people talk at dinners where the two families involved do not yet know each other, and the occasion is more formal than celebratory. Alara sat at the end of the table nearest Aldrich and ate her meal and paid attention to the people around her in her usual way, the cataloging, patient attention. She learned the names of the solicitor and the 2 property managers within the first 10 minutes and used them correctly by the end of the meal. She asked Lady Cora a question about the Vane estate outside the city, because she had been curious about the chapel, and Lady Cora had answered it in a way that started briefly and became longer, which told Alara that Lady Cora knew a great deal about the estate's history and had not been asked about it in some time. Aldrich noticed this exchange. He did not say anything about it, but he noticed. After the guests were gone and the house was quiet, Alara stood at the window of the large bedroom she had been given, still in her dress, and looked at the garden below. The garden was well kept but not decorative, the kind of garden that exists for order rather than beauty. There were straight paths and shaped hedges and nothing growing in it that had no purpose. She thought about all the rooms in this house she had not yet been in. She thought about all the things she did not yet know about the man she had just married. She felt something that was not quite fear and not quite excitement, but was some combination of both. The feeling of standing at the edge of a very large territory with a map that only showed the entrance. There was a knock at the connecting door. She turned. "Come in," she said. He came in. He had changed out of the formal clothes and was in something darker and simpler, and he looked, Alara thought, considerably more comfortable in the second set of clothes than he had in the first. "Are you settled?" he asked, looking around the room rather than at her in the assessing way he had, the same kind of look she gave rooms. "Yes," she said. "Thank you, the room is good." He nodded. He stood in the doorway for a moment in a way that was not awkward exactly, but was different from his usual precision, as if he had come to say something and had not yet located the exact words for it. "My aunt," he said, "will likely visit. She disapproved of this arrangement initially, and she will likely come to inspect you." "I would expect no less," Alara said. "She is direct," he said, "sometimes to a degree that others find offensive." "I find directness easier than politeness," Alara said. "I will manage." He looked at her then. "I thought you should know," he said, "that the financial settlement with your family is completed. My solicitor confirmed this afternoon. The documentation was received and processed." She had known this was coming. The 10-day deadline had passed 2 days ago, and she had received a brief letter from the solicitor confirming the outline. But hearing it said out loud in this room, in this house, was different. "Thank you," she said. "It is part of what we agreed," he said. "I know," she said. "It is still something to be thanked for." He absorbed this. "Good night, Miss Voss," he said, and then stopped because that was not correct anymore. She watched him understand this. "Good night," he said, adjusting, not using a name or a title. "Good night," she said. He went back through the connecting door. She listened to his footsteps cross his room. She heard the particular sound of a desk chair being pulled out, which told her he was going back to work, at whatever hour this was on whatever day this was, which was a thing she had half expected. She turned back to the window and the dark garden below. She was inside the map now. She had to learn it. The next morning she was up before the household. She dressed and went to find the kitchen, which was in the lower level, as most kitchens were in houses of this age. The cook, a broad woman named Mrs. Farwell, was already there, and looked up with a very slight expression of surprise when Alara appeared in the doorway. "Good morning," Alara said. "I am not here to reorganize anything. I only wanted to introduce myself and to ask if there is coffee." Mrs. Farwell stared at her for a moment. "There is coffee," she said. "Wonderful," Alara said, and sat at the small table in the corner that appeared to be where the kitchen staff had their own meals, and she waited while Mrs. Farwell poured a cup with an expression of controlled uncertainty. Alara drank the coffee and asked Mrs. Farwell how long she had been at Vane House. Mrs. Farwell said 15 years. Alara asked what the household usually had for breakfast, and Mrs. Farwell said the Duke usually had toast and coffee when he was working early and something larger when he was not. Alara said that was fine for her as well most days. Mrs. Farwell began to look slightly less like a woman bracing for something unpleasant. By the time Alara left the kitchen, she knew that Mrs. Farwell had been hired by Aldrich's previous housekeeper, that she had 2 children who were grown, that she believed strongly in the importance of a well-made soup, and that she had thought, based on the conversation that morning, that the new Duchess was going to be manageable. Manageable was a fine starting point. She spent the rest of the morning learning the house. Not all of it. That would take weeks. But she moved through the rooms on the ground floor and the first floor with the careful attention she gave to new libraries, opening drawers and sideboards only where it seemed appropriate to do so, looking at the paintings on the walls, noting which rooms got good light and when, finding where things were in relation to each other. She found on the ground floor in the east wing the household accounts room, a small room with a single desk, a row of ledgers on a shelf, and a lamp that was low on oil. She looked at the ledgers without touching them. They were orderly. She could see the marks of Aldrich's hand in the way they were arranged, the same precision as his desk upstairs. She went to find Mr. Gibbs. He was in his office, which was near the main entrance, a tidy room full of organized correspondence. "Mr. Gibbs," she said, "I would like to understand the household structure, not to change anything yet, to understand it. Could you find 20 minutes this week to explain how things are organized? Mr. Gibbs blinked. Of course, he said. Thank you, she said. Tomorrow morning if that works. Yes, he said, that works. She went back upstairs and found the house's main library, which was on the second floor, a proper library with good shelving and a fireplace. She stood in it for a few minutes, just looking. It was not the East Library of her childhood, which was beloved to her for reasons of familiarity rather than quality. This library was better stocked and larger, and had a particular quality of light in the afternoon that she could already tell she was going to spend time in. She found a novel she hadn't read, took it to the window seat and began. At 1 o'clock, a knock at the library door. It was not Aldrich. It was a young housemaid named Clara who appeared in the doorway with a slightly anxious expression. The Duke asks if you would join him for lunch, Clara said. This was the first lunch invitation. She had not expected it. Yes, Elara said, of course. She put her novel face up on the window seat, which was better for the spine, and followed Clara down to the dining room. Aldrich was already there. He was standing at the sideboard looking at something, a letter it appeared, and when she came in he set the letter aside and turned toward the table. They sat. The food was simple, cold meats and bread and a small soup, the kind of lunch produced by a household that is practical rather than showing off. Clara served it and withdrew. They ate. After a moment, Aldrich said, "You were in the kitchen this morning." "Yes," she said. "Mrs. Farwell mentioned it." "I introduced myself," Elara said. "I told her I wasn't there to change anything. I thought it was better to meet her early than to have her learn about me through other people's accounts." He was quiet for a moment. "She said you were pleasant," he said. "I was. She makes very good coffee." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. The same almost not quite thing she had seen in his study the first day. It came and went quickly. "Mr. Gibbs has agreed to meet with me tomorrow morning," she said, "to explain the household structure." "He told me," Aldrich said. She looked at him. "Is that all right?" "It was part of what we agreed," he said, "that you would manage the household." "Yes," she said, "but I am also aware that you are used to having things run in a specific way. I am not trying to disrupt anything before I understand what I am looking at." He looked at her over the rim of his water glass. "Most people," he said, "when they are given authority over something, use the authority immediately." "Most people," she said, "don't know what they're doing when they arrive somewhere new. They use authority to cover the uncertainty. I find it easier to learn first." He set the glass down. "What did you learn this morning?" he said. She told him. The kitchen, Mrs. Farwell, the accounts room and the oil-low lamp, the library and the quality of its afternoon light. He listened with the same focused attention he had given her in the study, not politely, not performing interest, but actually listening, the way you listen when the information is relevant to you and you are nodding it for later. "The lamp in the accounts room," he said when she finished. "It needs oil." "I know," he said. "I keep meaning to have it addressed." "I'll have it done this afternoon," she said, "unless you prefer to do it yourself." "Have it done," he said. They finished lunch. They talked a little more. Nothing significant, the way people talk when they are in the early stages of learning each other's rhythms, testing what the other person responds to and how they respond. She told him about the novel she had found in the library. He asked what it was about. She described it in a way that was interesting, not a summary but a question the book was asking, and he listened. He mentioned a problem he was working through with the northern property, something about water drainage and the timing of the spring planting. She asked a question about it that was more specific than he expected her to ask, and he answered it, and she asked another, and the conversation went on longer than either of them had planned, and Clara came in twice to clear things, and had to leave again both times because they were still at the table. When they finally stood, the afternoon was advanced. "Same time tomorrow," she said. He paused. "Yes," he said. She went to sort out the lamp in the accounts room. He went back upstairs to his study. And in the quiet and practical way that things begin when neither person is pretending and neither person is performing, and there is work to be done and a house to be learned, and a lamp that needs oil, a life started. It was not grand. It was not what anyone had expected. But it was honest, and it was real, and in a house where two people had both spent considerable time managing situations that were neither, that counted for a great deal more than it might have anywhere else. 3 months into her life at Vane House, Alara began to understand the silences. Not all of them at once. That would have been impossible. But gradually, the way a new reader begins to understand the grammar of a language they have been hearing without quite grasping, she started to identify what each of Aldrich's silences meant. There was the working silence, which was clean and focused and filled the room like steady weather. This was the silence of the study, the accounts room, the library when he was reading. It was not cold. It was concentrated. You could sit in it comfortably if you were also doing something with your hands or your mind, and she often did. There was the social silence, which was harder and more deliberate. This was the silence he wore to events, to dinners, to any gathering that required him to be present among people who wanted things from him. It functioned like armor. She had watched it at 2 functions in the first month, and she had noticed that under it he was not absent the way she had originally thought. He was attentive. He watched the room with the same kind of cataloging attention she used, noting who was speaking to whom, what people wanted, what they were not saying. He simply chose not to participate unless the participation had a purpose. There was a third silence, the one she had the least information about. This one appeared occasionally at dinner, when something was said or thought that she could not identify, and he went somewhere inside himself that was not the working silence or the social silence. It was quieter than either, more closed. She had learned not to try to open it, not because it frightened her, but because she understood that everyone had rooms inside themselves that they did not open on request, and she was not going to demand access to anything. She had her own closed rooms. But she watched, because watching was what she did. It was Lady Cora who gave her the first map. True to Aldrich's prediction, his aunt arrived 3 weeks after the wedding, on a gray Wednesday morning, in a carriage that was smaller than Alara had expected. Lady Cora was exactly as Aldrich had described her, upright, severe, with eyes that were dark like Aldrich's, and held the same quality of sustained and purposeful attention. She came into the drawing room and looked at Alara the way she had looked at the ceremony, with concentrated focus, as if she were completing an assessment she had started at a distance. They had tea. Lady Cora asked about the household. Alara answered in specific terms about what she had done and what she planned to do, because she had already learned that Lady Cora had no patience for vague answers. Lady Cora asked about the kitchen, about Mr. Gibbs, about the accounts room, which made Alara think she had been here before and knew where the oil was low. Lady Cora asked what Alara read. Alara told her. Lady Cora told her, without being asked, that she thought it was a strange marriage that might turn out to be a reasonable one. Vivienne would have been wrong for him, Lady Cora said, with no softening of the statement at all. She was exactly what people who do not know Aldrich think he wants. He does not want to be looked at with admiration. He wants to be looked at with attention. Alara held her teacup. "There is a difference," she said. "A significant one," Lady Cora said. "Admiration requires performance to sustain itself. Attention requires a person to actually exist." Alara thought about this. "What happened to him?" she said. She had not planned to ask. The question arrived before she had fully decided to ask it. Lady Cora looked at her. "That," she said, "is a question only he can answer. What I will tell you is that the coldness you see is not the original condition. It is the result of something. People do not build walls because they like walls. They build them because something outside required them. Ilara nodded. You should also know, Lady Cora continued, that he will not ask you for help. If he needs something from you, he will not know how to indicate it in a way that a normal person would recognize as asking. He will simply continue managing alone until the thing resolves or breaks. What do I do with that? Ilara asked. Pay attention, Lady Cora said, which, from what I can observe, is something you are already doing. Lady Cora left after 2 hours. She did not invite Ilara to call on her, which was the expected social form. She said, I will come back in a month, and left, which was not the social form at all but was considerably more honest. After that, Ilara started paying a different kind of attention. She was already paying attention to the household, to Mr. Gibbs and Mrs. Farwell and the 7 other people who kept the house running. She was already paying attention to the accounts, which she had been given access to and had started reviewing carefully without changing anything, simply understanding. She was already paying attention to the patterns of the house, which rooms were used and when, which doors opened onto which parts of the garden, how the light moved through the day. Now she started paying attention to Aldrich. Not in a way he would have noticed, or at least not immediately. She was not following him or monitoring him. She simply began to place observations beside each other. He kept very few personal objects in his study, which was a working room, and looked at. But on the small table beside the window there was a single photograph, not a portrait, a photograph which was more modern and less formal. It showed 3 people standing outside what she identified as the chapel on the Vane estate, the same chapel where they had been married. The photograph was old, the edges slightly curled, 2 adults and a child. She was not going to ask about it, but she noted it. He managed his own correspondence, not through Mr. Gibbs, in a way that was unusual. Most men of his position and with his volume of professional obligations would have delegated a portion of this. He wrote every letter himself. She did not know what was in them. She was not going to read his correspondence, but she observed the volume of it and the regularity and the fact that he used a particular pen that he kept separate from the others in the study, a detail no one who did not look carefully would have noticed. He knew the name of every child belonging to every member of his household staff, not just the names, the ages. Mrs. Farwell's oldest son was studying in the city. One of the footmen had a daughter who had been ill through the winter. Aldrich had asked about her recovery in a way that was brief but specific, the way you ask about something you have been keeping track of. He did not eat well when he was working on a problem. He ate consistently well when he was not. The kitchen learned this before Ilara did, but once she identified it, she began occasionally making sure that food appeared in the study at predictable hours when she knew he was deep in something, not sent up formally but left on a tray near the door, available. The first time she did this, he said nothing about it. The second time she did it, he said, at dinner that evening, the bread from this afternoon. Thank you. She said, you forget to eat when you are thinking. He said, yes. She said, it doesn't need to be a problem. He looked at her for a moment and then went back to his meal, and they talked about something else. But the bread appeared more regularly after that. She also noticed, over several weeks, when the third silence came. It came on specific days, not randomly. It came on the 14th of the month, which she eventually realized was significant because of the date in the photograph on the small table by the window, and it came in the early evenings, when the light through the study window went from gold to gray. It came when certain letters arrived. Letters she learned by their envelopes were from a particular address in the north that was different from the property address. She did not ask. She continued paying attention. And in between the attention and the silence and the bread on the tray and the evening conversations that grew longer and less careful by increments she could not quite measure, something else was happening. She was becoming, in a quiet and entirely unplanned way, comfortable. Not comfortable in the way you are comfortable with something familiar. Comfortable in the way you are comfortable with something true. She had spent 23 years making do with a house that overlooked her, a family that meant well and fell short, a life that had given her more independence than warmth, and she had built herself around the independence and considered it enough. This was something else. She could not have named it precisely. It was not dramatic. It did not announce itself. It was more like the difference between a lamp with low oil and a lamp with full oil. The same lamp, the same room, just more light. She was reading in the library one afternoon, a Thursday, when Aldrich appeared in the doorway. She looked up. He was carrying 2 books. He crossed to the window seat where she usually sat and placed both books on the small table beside her chair. He said nothing. He started to go. "What are these?" she said. "The one on top," he said from the doorway, "is connected to what you were saying at dinner on Monday, about the argument the author made in the one you were reading. The author here disagrees with that argument, specifically." She looked at the top book. She looked at the doorway. He was already turning to leave. "Aldrich," she said. He stopped. She had not used his name directly before. They had been in the same house for 3 months and she had not used his name, not because of formality, but because it had not yet felt like the right moment and she did not do things before they felt right. She watched him register it, the small shift in his posture. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. He left. She sat with the book in her lap for a long moment before she opened it. She was aware of something that had the shape of surprise but was warmer than surprise. She was aware that he had listened to a dinner conversation she had considered small and unremarkable and had gone and found a book that was a direct response to it. This was not a cold man's act. This was a man who had been paying attention. She opened the book. She read the first chapter. He was right. The author did disagree, specifically and in an interesting way, and she spent the rest of the afternoon in the library and then continued at dinner, where she outlined the disagreement, and Aldrich listened and added a point she hadn't considered, and the evening became one of those evenings that lasted longer than either of them intended. Clara came to clear the table twice. They did not notice her the second time. They were talking about ideas, about books and the arguments inside them, about the way some people believe a thing and other people believe the opposite thing, and both can point at the same evidence to support themselves, and what that means about evidence, and what it means about people, and what it means about the strange task of trying to know anything at all in a world where the same facts produce different conclusions depending on where you are standing when you look at them. He talked differently in those conversations than he did in any other kind. The precision was still there, but so was something else, something that moved and leaned into things, that found certain ideas genuinely delightful and was not very good at hiding the delight, a kind of brightness that appeared when his mind was fully engaged, and that she suspected very few people had seen because very few people had managed to produce it. She had managed to produce it. She sat with that quietly after he had said good night and gone upstairs. She sat in the library alone for a while with the lamp on, not reading, just sitting in the good light of the room that was becoming hers in the way that rooms become yours when you have spent real time in them. She thought about Lady Cora's words. He does not want to be looked at with admiration. He wants to be looked at with attention. She had been paying attention, and he had noticed. And this, she thought, looking at the 2 books on the table beside her chair, was what paying attention to a person who was paying attention back looked like. It looked like a book placed on a table without explanation. It looked like evenings that lasted longer than they were supposed to. It looked like nothing dramatic at all. And it was, she thought, considerably more than she had agreed to and considerably more than she had expected, and it did not frighten her. She picked up the second book, the one he hadn't mentioned, the one he had placed beneath the first one without comment. She looked at the cover. It was an old book, older than the other one, and on the inside cover someone had written in a hand she recognized as younger and less controlled than the current version of his handwriting. "This is the one that started everything." She closed it gently. She placed it back on the table. She turned off the lamp and went to bed. And she did not think about what the inscription meant. Not yet, because some things needed to be allowed to arrive in their own time, and this was one of them. She slept well. Outside the window the garden was dark and ordered, and in the morning it would be there, the same as always, waiting to be learned. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon in early spring, brought upstairs by Mr. Gibbs with his usual unreadable expression, and placed on the corner of Aldrich's desk, while Elara happened to be in the study discussing the spring budget with him. It was for the Harwick dinner. She did not know the name Harwick. Aldrich picked up the invitation, read it, and set it back down without any change in his expression, which meant it was either insignificant or it required careful management, and she had learned by now that those two things produced identical expressions on his face. "Do you need to attend?" she said. "Lord Harwick is connected to a trade negotiation I am currently managing," he said. "It is not required, but declining would create friction." "Then we go," she said. He looked at her. "You do not need to attend every function," he said. "You told me one formal engagement per month when we agreed terms," she said. "This will be the first, so yes, I come." He said nothing, which meant he had accepted this. The Harwick dinner was 3 days later, in a house in the newer and more fashionable part of the city, the part where the money was current rather than inherited. The house was very large and very bright and decorated in a way that showed someone had spent significant thought on making it look like no thought had been spent on it at all. There were perhaps 60 people across 2 connected rooms, the kind of gathering where conversation happened in clusters that shifted every 20 minutes and required constant navigation. Elara put on a blue dress. She owned 3 good dresses at this point. She had asked Aldrich early in the marriage what the expectation was regarding social dress. He had said, appropriate to the occasion. She had said, and who manages the cost of this? He had said, it comes from the household budget and you should consider it part of the function of the role rather than personal expense. She had said, then I will be sensible about it. He had said, I trust you to be. So she had 3 good dresses, which was more than she had ever had before and was genuinely sufficient. The blue one was the best of them. They arrived at the Harwick house in the evening in Aldrich's carriage and walked in together in a way that was precise and coordinated without being rehearsed. She had noticed that walking beside him in public spaces had a particular quality. He did not slow down for her, but he also did not stride ahead. He simply walked at a pace that assumed she was there and able to match it, which she always did, and the result was that they moved through rooms together with an efficiency that drew attention without inviting it. Lady Harwick, a small and extremely energetic woman of about 45, met them at the entrance and said all the expected things with a brightness that was entirely genuine rather than performed, which Elara appreciated. She introduced them to a handful of people immediately, which was either generous hospitality or a subtle management of where they were placed socially, possibly both. The evening began. Elara did what she always did at social gatherings, which was to learn the room. She identified the significant people, the ones who others turned toward slightly when they spoke, and the ones who wanted to appear significant but weren't quite. She identified the conversational currents, which topics were alive and which were dead. She located where Aldrich had gone, which was toward a group of men near the north window who were discussing the trade situation, and she left him there and went to find her own conversation. She talked with an older woman about gardens, a genuine conversation because the woman knew a great deal about soil, and the science of growing things in difficult conditions, and Alara found this genuinely interesting. She talked with a younger man, perhaps her own age, who was a junior member of a firm connected to shipping, and who had sensible things to say about the current state of the harbor regulations. She listened more than she spoke, which was her natural preference, and which had the side effect of making people feel that the conversation was particularly good, because the most enjoyable conversation for most people is one in which they are genuinely listened to. An hour into the evening, a man appeared beside her. His name, she would learn in the next few minutes, was Lord Dunmore. He was perhaps 50, with the kind of ease that certain men of certain positions acquire, the ease of someone who has spent decades in rooms where he is acknowledged and has stopped noticing it consciously. He was not unpleasant. He was the kind of person who was pleasant in the way that oil is smooth. It moved easily and did not stick to anything. He began by asking the expected questions. How was she finding the city in spring? Was she settled into the Vane household? Did she enjoy these gatherings? She answered each one with the standard amounts of pleasant response. Then he said, with a smile that was easy and casual, "It is quite something to see the replacement at work." The word was spoken lightly, conversationally, as if it were simply an observation rather than a thing with edges. Alara did not react visibly. She registered the word, placed it, understood its intent, and took 2 seconds to decide how to respond. She was going to respond precisely and without heat. She was going to say something clear and final that closed the subject without making a scene, because making a scene was not something she did, and because she was entirely capable of handling this on her own. She opened her mouth. Aldrich was beside her. She had not heard him cross the room. She had not seen him move away from the group near the north window. But he was there, at her right shoulder, with a glass in one hand, and the specific quality of attention he directed at things that required management. He looked at Lord Dunmore. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. He did not produce the kind of theatrical confrontation that the room would have talked about for a week. He said something quiet and specific that she caught only the end of, something about the Dunmore shipping license that was currently under review and the timing of that review's conclusion. And his tone was perfectly civil and precisely measured, the tone of a man making a factual observation about the connection between two things that were apparently related. Lord Dunmore's easy smile did not disappear, but something behind it shifted. "Of course," he said with the same casual ease, "no offense intended." He moved on. There was a silence between Alara and Aldrich, a brief one, while both of them watched Lord Dunmore drift across the room toward another cluster of people. "You did not need to do that," Alara said. "No," he said. "I was handling it." "I know," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the middle of the room, not at her, with the expression he wore when he was thinking through something rather than responding to it. "You were angry," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. She did not say anything about this. She stood with it. It was the most direct thing he had said to her about any internal state since the beginning of the marriage, and she was not going to diminish it by commenting on it too quickly. The evening continued. She talked to 4 more people. Aldrich concluded his business conversation. They stood together near the end of the room for a period, not talking to each other but present in the same space, and she became aware, over the course of that period, that they had taken a position in the room that was slightly apart from the crowd in the way that 2 people do, when they are instinctively placing themselves in relation to each other rather than in relation to the room. She noticed this. She was not sure he had noticed. On the carriage ride home, she sat across from him in the dark and watched the city lights pass the window. He looked out the other window. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. "Dunmore," she said eventually. Has significant opinions about people he has not bothered to understand, Aldrich said. That is most people, she said. Most people do not say those opinions to my wife at a dinner. I have been asked to attend as a professional courtesy. She looked at him. He was still looking out the window. She absorbed the particular way he had said my wife, not possessively, not with any territorial quality, simply accurately. She is my wife. This is a fact. Someone said something to that fact that required correction. Thank you, she said. He turned from the window and looked at her. There was something in his face that she had not seen before, not the working expression, not the social expression, not even the dinner brightness when they talked about books. This was something more private, more unguarded, the look of someone who has done something out of feeling rather than calculation and is sitting with the knowledge that they have been seen doing it. The dress is a good color, he said. She blinked. He looked back out the window. She sat with this for the rest of the ride, looking at her own window. She was aware that something had moved, not dramatically, not with fanfare. The way a river moves when the season changes, the same water, the same banks, but a different quality to the current, a different weight and direction. At the house, he handed her out of the carriage and they went inside and said good night in the entrance hall. She went upstairs. He went to the study, because he always went to the study, because there was always something to be done. She changed out of the blue dress and hung it up with care. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the connecting door, which was closed, as it always was. She thought about the word he had used on Lord Dunmore. Not a threat, something more precise, a reminder of consequence, spoken in a civil tone, that had required him to have known what Lord Dunmore's circumstances were, and to have noted the point of vulnerability, and to have been paying attention in the room while appearing to be only half present. He had been watching the room the way she had. He had been watching her. She thought about the photograph on the small table in the study, the chapel, the two adults and the child, the hand on the younger photograph in the book. This is the one that started everything. She thought about what Lady Cora had said. People do not build walls because they like walls. She thought about the third silence, the one that came on the 14th of the month and in the gray evenings, and when certain letters arrived from the north. She did not knock on the connecting door. Not because she did not want to. Because she understood that you do not open someone else's wall. You can stand near it. You can make it clear that you are not leaving. You can wait, without demanding, without pretending the wall is not there, and sometimes, eventually, if the person inside the wall has decided they might trust you, they open it themselves. She was very good at waiting. She lay down. She looked at the ceiling. She thought about the blue dress, and the particular way a person who does not give compliments easily gives a compliment, without ceremony, without looking at you, in a voice that does not invite response. A good color. She slept with the feeling that the current in the river had shifted, and she could not see where it was heading, and she was not, for the first time in her life, troubled by that. The letter arrived on a Friday morning in late spring. Alara was in the accounts room when Mr. Gibbs brought it. He handed it to her with the particular neutrality he used for things he had an opinion about but had decided were not his to comment on. She recognized the handwriting immediately, even though she had not seen it in over a year. It was her sister's handwriting, looping and confident, the handwriting of someone who had always been told their work was beautiful. She held the letter for a moment without opening it. Then she put it in the drawer of the accounts desk and went back to the figures she had been reviewing. She finished the accounts review. She had a brief conversation with Mr. Gibbs about an upcoming expense related to the roof in the east wing. She went to the kitchen to check on a matter with Mrs. Farwell that she had been meaning to address. She went to the library and sat for 20 minutes with a book she did not read. Then she went back to the accounts room, opened the drawer and read the letter. It was 2 pages. Vivienne wrote the way she spoke, in long and flowing lines that circled what they meant before arriving at it. The first page was largely an account of where she had been and what had happened. The cavalry officer, Captain Hale, had died of an illness 6 months into their marriage. She had been in the north of the country, in a small house near the coast, managing things alone. She did not have money of her own, the family's settlement not having extended to her, because she had not been the one who negotiated it. She was coming back. The second page said she had heard about the marriage. She said she was glad for Alara, though the phrasing of this was the phrasing of someone who had not quite absorbed the reality of the situation, who was glad in the way you are glad for an unexpected outcome that has not yet been placed in its proper proportion in your understanding. She said she wanted to visit. She said she missed Alara. This last sentence, the shortest one on the page, was the one Alara sat with for the longest time because she believed it. That was the complicated thing about Vivienne. She meant what she said in the moment she said it. She had also, for most of their lives, meant other things simultaneously without being fully aware of the conflict between them. She had missed Alara and she had also overlooked her. She had loved Alara and she had also used her. Not deliberately, not with calculation. She simply moved through the world as the center of her own story, and had not noticed what that cost the people orbiting her. Alara folded the letter and put it in her pocket. She thought about it for the rest of the day. She did not mention it at dinner. She and Aldrich talked about the roof in the east wing, which needed attention, and about a letter he had received from one of the property managers with a proposal he wanted her opinion on, because she had been reviewing accounts long enough to have opinions worth having. She gave her opinion. He disagreed with part of it and said why. She revised her opinion slightly in the direction of his reasoning. He accepted the revision. They ate the soup Mrs. Farwell had made, which was very good, as Mrs. Farwell's soups always were. She told him about the letter after the soup. Not as a confession, not as a request for guidance. She told him because they had agreed to honesty, and because Vivienne connected to his history as much as to hers, and because she did not want him to hear about it from elsewhere. He was quiet for a moment after she finished. "She wants to come here," he said. "To the city," Alara said. "She wants to visit the family. She will want to come here as well." He picked up his water glass and set it down again. It was one of the small movements he made when he was thinking and had not landed on a conclusion yet. "That is your decision," he said. "It involves your house," she said. "I told you when we agreed terms that your sister was your matter to manage," he said. "I hold to that." She nodded. "But I want you to know," she said, "that I intend to see her on my own terms. I will not allow this house to become a place where the situation she created is undone as if it did not happen. She made a choice. The consequences of that choice are hers. I will help her where I can, because she is my sister and I am not capable of being entirely cold on that point. But I will not be the path back to everything she walked away from." He was looking at her. Not the cataloging look, something more direct. "You are angry," he said. It was the same words she had used to him in the carriage after the Harwick dinner. She absorbed this. "Yes," she said, "I think I am. I have not spent much time on it." "It is allowed," he said. She looked at her plate. "She left," Alara said, "and the family fell apart and my mother went quiet in her green chair. And my father lost his ability to manage things, and I was the one still there. I am always the one still there. And I went and I made a plan and I walked into your study and I made something from what was left. And now she is coming back and she is going to be lovely and sad and people are going to feel sorry for her. And no one is going to notice that there was another version of this story in which someone did all the work and no one saw." She stopped. She had not planned to say all of that. The dining room was very quiet. Aldrich set down his glass. He was not looking away from her, the way she had half expected him to do. He was still looking at her, with the full and direct attention he gave things that mattered, and it was for this reason that what he said next arrived with the particular weight it did. I noticed, he said. She looked at him. I notice, he said, everything you do in this house, everything you have built here. I am aware of what it cost you to walk into my study that day, and I am aware of what you have done since. None of it has gone unnoticed. She held his gaze for a moment. She felt the thing she had been carrying that she had not named yet begin to move in her chest, shift position, settle differently. She did not cry. She was not a person who cried easily. But she felt the pressure of it behind her eyes, the pressure of being seen by someone after a very long time of not being seen, and she held it carefully. "Thank you," she said. "It is the truth," he said. They finished dinner. The next morning she wrote to Vivienne. She was polite. She said she was glad Vivienne was safe. She said she would arrange for them to meet in the city when Vivienne returned at a place of Alara's choosing at a time of Alara's choosing. She said she looked forward to seeing her. She did not say, "Come to Vane House." She did not say, "Come home." She gave no address for a reply beyond the city house of the Voss family, where their mother still lived. She sealed the letter and gave it to Mr. Gibbs to post. Vivienne arrived in the city 3 weeks later. Alara had chosen a terroom for the meeting. Neutral ground, public, with a kind of established formality that would keep the conversation from becoming something it should not be in a semi-public space. She arrived 5 minutes early, as she always did, and ordered tea, and sat facing the door. Vivienne came through the door of the terroom and paused, the way she always paused in doorways, instinctively, with the effect of making the room turn. She had widow's black, and it suited her in a way that was not planned, and was therefore more effective than if it had been. She looked thinner, and there were edges to her face that had not been there before, the edges that grief makes when it stays long enough. She saw Alara and crossed the room. They embraced, briefly, with the careful precision of two people who love each other and have also hurt each other, and have not yet worked out how to hold both of those things at the same time. They sat. Tea arrived. There was a silence. "You look well," Vivienne said. "You look tired," Alara said. Vivienne smiled, a genuine one. "That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in months." Alara poured tea into both cups, and they sat with it for a moment. "Tell me what you need," Alara said. "I need to know I can come home," Vivienne said. "You can come to Mother's house," Alara said. "That is still home." "Yes," Vivienne said. Then, after a pause, "I meant home to all of it, to the family, to being part of things again." Alara looked at her. "Vivienne," she said in a voice that was not unkind, "you were never removed from the family. You removed yourself. Those are different. You can come back. You are already back. But the position you left is not exactly as you left it. Things have changed." Vivienne held her teacup with both hands the way she always had, when something was making her uncertain. "You are different," Vivienne said. "Yes," Alara said. "You are," Vivienne paused, not searching for a compliment, genuinely sorting something out. "You seem like a person who knows exactly where they are." Alara thought about this. "I am," she said. "I know exactly where I am." The meeting lasted an hour. They talked. Not everything. Not the large things, not yet. But the small necessary things, the real things about health and money and what Vivienne needed practically and what Alara could help with and what she could not. Alara was honest about the boundaries. She was not cruel about them. She said, "Here is what I can do, and here is what is outside what I can do, and here is what you need to go to other people for." Vivienne listened in a way she had not always listened before, quietly, without redirecting, like someone who had been through something that had taken away the luxury of not listening. At the end, standing outside the terroum in the spring air, Vivienne looked at her sister. "I am glad you went to him," she said. "I did not think you would. I did not think you were that kind of person." Alara looked at her. "What kind of person did you think I was?" she said. Vivienne considered. "The kind who waits." "I was," Alara said. And then I stopped. She walked away. She walked back through the city streets the way she always walked, at an even and deliberate pace, past the houses and the shops and the people going about their days, and she thought about what Vivienne had said, and about what it meant about who she had been before and who she was now. She had been the one who waited. She had waited for 23 years. And then she had stood up from the blue chair in the East Library of her childhood home, and she had walked into a room no one had thought to send her to, and she had said what she had to say, and she had not left until it was done. She was not that person anymore. She was someone who had looked at what was left and made something from it. She was someone a duke had looked at over his desk and chosen to keep looking at. She was someone who knew exactly where she was. She went home. Not to Voss House, that was not home anymore. She went to Vane House, and she went inside, and she went to the library, and she sat in the window seat with the good afternoon light, and she read. And later at dinner, she told Aldrich how it had gone, and he listened, and he asked 2 questions, and she answered them, and he said nothing that was not necessary and everything that was. And she thought, this is what it feels like when someone sees you clearly and does not look away. She found the documents by accident. Or more precisely, she found the first document by accident, and the rest she found because she went looking, which made it less of an accident and more of a decision she made before she was fully aware she was making it. It was a Tuesday in early summer. The accounts room had been her domain for months now, and she had introduced a system of organization that was more efficient than what had been there before, not radically different, just cleaner. She was looking for a specific receipt related to repairs in the east wing of the house, and she opened a drawer that she did not usually open because it was in the older part of the desk, the part that predated her tenure. Inside the drawer there were 3 folders. They were not labeled with anything alarming. They were labeled in the same hand as the ledgers, Aldrich's precise handwriting, and they contained what appeared to be correspondence from 18 months ago. The top folder had the name of a solicitor she did not recognize, different from Aldrich's current solicitor, someone older, someone from a previous arrangement. She almost closed the drawer. She would later think about this moment, the almost. She would think about the fact that she had lived in this house for 5 months under an agreement built on honesty, and that honesty goes in both directions, and that she might simply have closed the drawer and asked him directly. She did not close the drawer. She read the first letter. It was from the previous solicitor to a party she eventually identified as the Voss family solicitor, dated 16 months ago, 14 months before the engagement between Aldrich and Vivienne had been publicly announced. It was a preliminary communication, dry and legal, outlining the general parameters of a potential arrangement between the Vane household and the Voss family. The letter was unremarkable. These things began with preliminary communications. This was simply the beginning of a negotiation. She read the second letter. The second letter was where it became interesting. It was a letter from Aldrich himself, not through the solicitor, a personal letter written in his own hand to the previous solicitor, and it was a response to something she did not have. Some initial framing of what the Voss family was proposing. In his letter, Aldrich had made a set of observations about the proposal that were very specific and very precise, in the same way all his thinking was specific and precise. He had noted that the arrangement, as initially proposed, was designed primarily around the elder Miss Voss and her social qualities. He had noted that the family's financial situation was significant and would require a settlement of a particular structure to be genuinely resolved. He had noted that the elder Miss Voss, from what limited public observation he had, was a skilled social figure, but that a household of the kind he managed required more than social skill. He had noted, and here was the part that made her stop breathing for exactly 4 seconds, that he had been observing the family situation from a distance for some time, and that his preference was not specifically for the elder Miss Voss, but for the person in the Voss household who appeared to do things. He had indicated that if the arrangement was to be with the elder daughter, he would proceed, but that he had doubts about the fit. The letter was 16 months old. 16 months before Vivienne had left with Captain Hale. 14 months before Aldrich and Vivienne's engagement had been announced. She sat in the accounts room for a long time. She put the folder back in the drawer and closed it. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked at the garden. She looked at it for 10 minutes, at the straight paths and the shaped hedges and the purposeful order.